Want more positivity in your life? Subscribe, turn on notifications, follow us, and all that techie stuff. We'd love to hear from you. Comment, share, or give us a thumbs up. We are grateful to have you hanging out with us at Matt Logan Speaks.
And part of the school resource program, the whole point of the program is we don't go there to write tickets. We don't go there to, we're not the hall monitors either.
Right.
But we're there to help, one, develop relationships with the kids from young to old, from 6 and up, to help build a relationship where they can trust us and they look at us as friends, as helpers, as somebody that they can go to if they're in need.
Yeah.
Our purpose or our goal is to build that trust level all the way up with those kids. Now, if there are kids that are having challenges or going in the wrong direction, our goal then is to work with those kids and develop a relationship and a bond with those kids to help try and direct them to go the right way.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the long-term effect, Dave, he has kids that have graduated from high school that'll text him or call him saying, "Hey, Dave, Deputy," and they still call him Deputy Dave. Yeah. Deputy Dave, I got this stuff going on. How do you think I should handle it? You don't think he's making a difference in those schools?
Right.
What bothers me the most is lately I've heard some leadership at the local, state, and federal level, when you talk about cops and talks about all the stuff that they're dealing with the riots and the looting and the anti-law enforcement garbage, and they say, well, that's what they signed up for.
Ooh.
I'm like, really? That's not what they signed up. They didn't sign up to be hated, to be spit on, to be threatened, to have to worry about their family, to have to hurt somebody, or to get into a shooting incident. They didn't sign up for any of that.
No.
They signed up to make a difference.
Yeah.
And that's what Dave does every day with these kids.
Yeah.
And that's what our guys on the road do. And it's just so frustrating when everybody's looking for talking points. Everybody's looking for that big sound bite or that big tweet that everybody's going to read and share because they jumped on the anti-police bandwagon but they have nothing to back it up with.
And what's interesting, so I have been being a little bit more pointed about asking questions. So if you with just general public people, right. I run into people at hotels and Lyft rides. Yeah,
I've seen you've done videos where you've talked to people.
There's some goofy fun stuff.
I love it.
But so I've been trying to be a little bit more and a little bit more, I would say, even diplomatic in asking some of those questions. And so people that you can definitely tell are on one side of the aisle and people that are on the other, which I'm still not quite sure how that all works, simply because we're all humans,
right.
And we have to I'm this and you're that
right.
kind of attitude. But anyway,
right.
I digress. So in asking these questions, so let's say over here you have a conservative and you ask the questions like what are your like 3 beliefs, or what would you like to see, the top 3 things? They want to have prosperity.
Yep.
They want to be protected, and they want to be left alone.
Yep.
And this is generalizing it, not saying that what do you think of the sheriff?
Right. Yep.
This is just kind of just having conversation and squeezing in some questions.
Yep.
And they hardly know it.
All right.
You ask the other side, the left,
yep.
It's the same freaking answer.
Yeah. Yep.
Everybody wants that.
Yep.
Okay, so if everybody wants that on the level that you and I are on, essentially,
right.
We see all these other things happening in Minneapolis, just miles away from where we're at. I drove past within about 2 blocks of the stuff in Portland. Same thing in Seattle.
Right.
And I've been in L.A.
Yep.
Not quite as close, but it seems to me these are different groups.
Yep.
People are saying it's not Antifa. It's not all this. What do you say? Is that accurate? When you're investigating and when you're looking at something like this, you have people on both sides of the aisle. They're coming up with really similar questions. They want to be protected. They want to be prosperous. They want to be left alone.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden you come to these other areas and it's a war zone.
Right. I think, so I talked with a gentleman in Rochester who is a retired Army staff sergeant, African-American, and he grew up in Chicago, or Chicago suburbs. And we were talking about some of my posts and some of the stuff that we do on social media in a column that I write. And
I didn't even know you know how to read.
Right?
You can write even?
And a cop, right? You know, the one class I had to pay attention to in school was my English class because my dad was the teacher. Yeah, so I had to pay attention to
I had to.
No. Yeah, my dad was my English teacher for 2 years. So
sure.
But what he said, and I thought it was really interesting, he said, we were talking about the notion of systemic racism in law enforcement and issues with law enforcement in some of these bigger communities. And he said, if you kind of step back, he said, if you look at a lot of these young people in, let's say Chicago, for example, a lot of these young people in Chicago who live in these higher crime areas, areas that have a much stronger police presence because they're high crime areas, yeah, and areas that may see a lot more aggressive police actions because of the violent crime nature that they deal with. Mm-hmm. He said, if you take a look at these young folks who have lived their entire life in Chicago, and that's all they've ever seen, they assume that every place else is like that too. Mm. So they assume that this is everywhere. If we have a problem with law enforcement in Chicago, it's all across the country. It's everywhere. Everybody's got to have that problem. He said, now step back, and he said, you look at where you're coming from in Dodge County.
Yeah.
You grew up in Dodge. I grew up in Dodge County. My dad was a cop and a teacher, and he said, albeit you're not as diverse as these bigger cities, but you do have diversity there. Yeah. Yet you have little, if any, racial issues at all in your county, mm-hmm, and minority relations with your sheriff's office and your community is very much an open door, positive experience for people. He said, you having grown up there, and I moved away for a brief time and then I came back, but he said, that's all you know. So it's easy for you to assume that everywhere else it's the same way too. I'm like, whoa,
that's wisdom.
That is kind of deep. I guess I hadn't really thought about it that way before. And he said, obviously the ones that are speaking out the strongest about this are people in these bigger metro areas: Seattle, Portland, Chicago, Milwaukee, Minneapolis. But again, people that may have not been exposed to anything else but what they're complaining about in their communities.
That's a really good point.
It's kind of interesting when you think about it, So it doesn't, again, his point is there isn't systemic racism, and there isn't
coming from a black man.
Right. And the other point he made too, which I thought was kind of interesting, he said in Chicago,
and I've talked to several same thing.
And he said, racism in Illinois goes both ways. Yeah. He said there are just as many black racists as there are white racists. Sure. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He said when I was growing up, there were communities you knew that if you're white, you didn't drive in it. You just didn't drive into that town. Just the same, we had communities where myself as a black person, a black kid, it's not safe for me to drive in this town. I know.
Yeah.
So just kind of an interesting perspective. So from that standpoint, then you kind of step back. Law enforcement's got to step back as a whole and go, one, the narrative is to take a broad brush and to paint everybody to paint all law enforcement as racist or as being terrible in regards to use of force or bad cops or whatever. To take that broad brush and paint it on everybody nationwide because of these small pockets of problems albeit it's frustrating, but it does give us an opportunity to step back and go, well, so what can we do to make things better? What can we do in communities like ours in Dodge County, for example? What can we do to make sure we continue on the same path that we're on, where we don't have those issues? And I think that's where a lot of CLEOs, or chiefs or sheriffs, CLEO, chief law enforcement officer.
Yeah.
A lot of chiefs and sheriffs, more sheriffs than chiefs, because chiefs are really kind of at will to their mayor and city council. But that's where a lot of the sheriffs are stepping up and saying, we got to step up, because this isn't us. But we got to continue to improve on what we've got to make sure our community trusts us. And the biggest frustration with our cops that are working the road every day is every time they hear the anti-law enforcement garbage on TV, on the national news, on the radio, or whatever, all that stuff just weighs on them. It weighs on them. It weighs on their families. It weighs on their kids. It weighs on their parents. It weighs on their communities, because they've worked so hard in those communities to build that level of trust with the people they're dealing with, and then you see all this negative anti-law enforcement garbage in the media, and the more and more you hear it, the more and more you start to wonder,
is it true?
Is it true? And for the men and women that work on the road, it's stressful enough just to do the job, and deal with what they have to deal with. Then you put on all this other garbage that we're dealing with. And the weight and the pressure that puts on them, not only from the standpoint of stress, but also from the standpoint of second guessing themselves when they're reacting to a call or going to a scene. So I wrote a column a couple of years ago, shortly after Ferguson, and I called it the BLM effect, where with the narrative being, back then the narrative was so strong that and we had officers being attacked across the country and shot across the country because of the badge. And with the BLM effect, we talk about how you put this much pressure on these cops, they're going to start acting different, and they're going to start second guessing themselves because of the narrative. For example, doing a traffic stop. I do a traffic stop and I pull up on a gentleman, and I pull up and I see he's an African American.
You're not talking about mine. Okay.
No, not yours. Not yours. Not that one. You pull up on somebody who's an African American male.
Yeah.
And in the past, I hadn't even thought about it. It's like, do you know I stopped you? And then he would say yes or no or whatever, and I would explain it. And then I say, if I can get your driver's license and insurance, and we'll go from there. And you didn't think about it. Mm-hmm. But fast forward to Ferguson and afterwards, with all that stuff you hear on the news over and over and over and over again, you start to wonder and sometimes worry, is he going to act or react differently to me? Does he think I'm racist because of my badge?
Yeah.
I know I'm not.
But does he know?
Sure. And how's this going to go? So then you start to second guess everything.
Yeah.
Or it's like the use of force issues with, for example, the most recent case where the gentleman pulled the knife and was shot in his car, behind the driver's door of his car.
Yeah.
That video.
Yeah.
So it's pretty standard training that somebody with a sharp-edged weapon, you only have a matter of seconds, if not milliseconds, to react if that person comes at you with that knife.
Yeah.
Our vests don't protect us from sharp objects like that.
Yeah.
A blade. They're not rated that way.
And then there was actually a video, I don't know if you saw it, but that came out where there was a guy that was tased with a knife.
Yep.
And I can't remember if it was before or after the Kenosha incident.
Yep.
But guy had a blade, probably I'd say 10 to 12 inches long.
Yeah.
Which is extremely dangerous in itself, that kind of length.
Right.
This isn't just a little knife.
Right.
Tased him. He went down, acted like he was down. The cop went in to take the knife and everything. And the guy got up.
He got cut.
And he got cut up bad.
Yep.
Real bad.
Yep. So
I saw that because I went and because I'm looking for things.
Yep.
That didn't get shares.
No, of course
that
not.
didn't get all this media
Right.
attention and things like that.
Right. So we're trained if on a sharp edge incident like that, if you're the only officer there dealing with this person and you don't have a second person there or a third person there, you're not going to go to your less lethal. You're not going to go to your taser because it may or may not work.
Right. A lot of times that kind of adrenaline, it doesn't work.
No. And it depends on the clothing. It depends on where the probes strike. It depends on can often depend on if there's any controlled substance on board with the subject. So, for example, for us, and most agencies are the same way, where they'll train if you are engaging a subject with a knife, and you have less lethal, which would be a taser or beanbag round or whatever. Typically for us, it's around here it's tasers. If you have two, one's going to have a lethal out, a handgun out, and another one's going to have a taser out, and you're going to try and talk this person down. But the guy with a handgun the part of the training is if the officer with the taser deploys that taser and it doesn't work and he gets charged by the guy with the knife, our goal is to go home at night. Yeah. We got families at home, we got kids at home, and obviously our we want everybody to go home. Yeah. But when it comes to it, when it comes down to me or you, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to go home.
Yeah.
If I feel that my life is threatened. Which
comes down to, you talked about the accountability and stuff that the departments have in the process of complaints. Why is there no accountability for the criminal? There's not.
Isn't that a good question?
I'm really sorry, and I've had this discussion with people who think that some of these the Kenosha, I had a conversation with a gentleman. He thought it was okay that the guy had a knife and was attacking the police. He thought it was okay.
Right.
I'm like, dude, we can't talk anymore.
Right. Right. And
that's never okay.
There are a couple states now that have changed assaulting a police officer to a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
So it's like a speeding ticket, which makes no sense.
No.
It makes no sense to me.
Should never be a misdemeanor if you attack anybody.
No.
Anybody.
It's just,
it kind of gets back to that, that people, they want prosperity, they want safety, and they want to be left alone.
Right.
Which essentially, the safety piece of it, to me, they want you to keep them safe. They want me to keep them safe, which means I'm not going to attack them. I'm not going to steal their stuff.
Yep.
That's what you boil it down to.
Yep.
So therefore, if I'm going to go do that, now you kind of have a right to make sure I don't.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
So I asked that gentleman, well, what if they came into your house and just said they want your stuff? What if they wanted your wife? Mm-hmm. What are you going to do then? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not a cop, and that's not going to be the... And I'm like, wait a minute.
Right.
It's a human.
Right.
Versus another human.
Right.
One's doing something very bad. That's a pretty no-brainer. You just explained that. You would defend your wife.
Right.
You would defend your children and your property.
Yep.
That's what you're doing.
Right. And
there's some bad cops.
Right. Absolutely.
Look, there are.
Yep.
I've been pulled over by them, not in your county.
Yep. Thank you. Because always call me.
It was quite a ways away from here, so it was a long time ago. But it did give me a bad taste and things like that. But it nonetheless, people have bad days. I get that.
Right.
But I seriously did think about filing a complaint because he was just an asshole.
Yep.
Let's just call it what it is.
Yep.
So I get that, right? I'm not saying that y'all are good.
Right.
Just like I'm not always good.
Right.
Like I screw up. I make people mad. I get pissed off. And,
Yep.
it's the way it is.
Right.
But 99.9% of the time, it's not lethal.
Right.
Unless someone's being attacked, you're being attacked, or
Right.
you're being threatened to all those different things.
Right.
Why did we get away? You have to be accountable. Why doesn't the criminal have to be accountable?
So one frustrating example of that is in Minnesota, you have a duty to retreat. So, for example, in your home, somebody kicks in your door and comes in, and you feel that you're being threatened by them. According to the state of Minnesota, per statute, your duty is to retreat to either out the door, lock yourself in a bedroom, in a bathroom, whatever, and call 911. You have a duty to retreat.
Okay, let me stop you there.
Yep.
I have a duty to retreat, but I also have a duty to protect my family.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So I retreat, so I just leave the bad guys in the house with the kids?
Right. I would.
Or what? You know what I'm saying?
Right? No, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'm sorry.
So they're saying if you can't articulate that you have reason to believe you're at threat of great bodily harm or death, you have a duty to retreat and call law enforcement.
I'm not going to do it.
No. That way, a lot of states have the castle law, where you come in, somebody comes into your home, it's game on.
Yeah.
And it's, thank God we've never dealt with that kind of an issue here in Dodge County. We did have a string a while where, when we were dealing with a lot of the meth manufacturing, we still did with a lot of meth. But there was a stretch of time where we were dealing with a lot of burglaries, and a lot of daytime burglaries of rural properties where people were either home or not home.
You don't know this, and I chose not to. There was nothing that could be done about it, but I had over 200 gallons worth of fuel stolen.
Yep.
I didn't report it because what are you going to do? I'm wasting your time.
Right.
But I did share it on Facebook, and I have no doubt. And the reason I did that was because I have no doubt that the person knew I had the fuel.
Yep.
Right. So it's someone that's probably follows me on Facebook.
Yep.
So they got the message.
Yep.
Right. And it didn't happen again.
Right.
Granted, I do lock it up really well now.
That helps.
Right. But still, they came on my property middle of the night and 200 gallons.
Yeah.
I mean,
holy cow, that's a lot of fuel.
That's not a couple of gas cans.
Right. Right.
Right.
Right.
So they knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And they knew that I had it.
Right.
And all those other things. I will make sure that if I'm here and someone's doing that, they're not going to ever want to come back.
Right. No, I agree.
Whether I go to jail or not,
right.
frankly.
Right.
I mean, that's not my bad.
Right.
And so that criminal, what can we do? Let me put it like that. What can we do to help?
One thing I think that really needs to change is we need to enforce the laws that we put in place.
Yeah.
The DUI laws, for example, when they switched it up, so your first degree DUI was a felony, and the end result was prison time. We have all across the state of Minnesota, you've got people who've had 8, 10, 12 or more DUIs. And if they've sat very little. Now, I understand the need to and the want to help, to provide treatment, to try and get it down to the what's the root problem, whether it's mental health or whether it's a chemical imbalance or whether it's just simply addiction. I understand wanting to help that person, but at some point they've got to become accountable for their actions. Yeah. And the laws that you put on the books don't do any good if our guys on the street are busting their butt to try and keep things safe and to try and catch these guys to make sure they're not out there killing somebody on the road.
Yeah.
And then find out they're right back out again.
Yeah.
It's really frustrating for us.
You probably know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to say the name, but you might think of it. In Minneapolis, they were up and they had to testify with what had happened in Minneapolis. It was through the riots and the blocking of the roads and all those things, right? And one of the officers that was testifying was asked the question. I'm not going to get it verbatim by any means, but was essentially asked the question about why didn't you do this? I got to give him props for answering it like this, because he said, because you told me I couldn't.
Right.
My job is to enforce the laws that are on the books, and you told me to back down.
Yep. Wow.
Now what?
Props to him.
Yes.
Or her, whichever.
It was a him.
It was a him. Yeah.
There were some ladies that testified too and said nearly the same thing, but they're like,
how frustrating for those officers.
Unbelievable.
And
Unbelievable.
so then the trickle down effect with that, when their city council goes from a defund and shutdown, they go from defund to reform to now reimagine. I think that's the new buzzword.
Is that okay?
It's reimagine.
Sure.
The police force now. You've completely turned your back on this agency and this department and on these cops.
Yes.
You've completely turned your back on them and run them over the bus. You backed up and forward a couple of times.
And now they're wondering why there's so much crime.
Why is there so much crime and where are the cops?
Exactly.
They've had how many retire or quit because of the
100 and something just in Minneapolis?
Yep. Now, a lot of sheriffs throughout the state and other CLEOs have made it clear you're going to turn your back on your cops and your agency, and you're going to do what you're doing when next time you ask for help, you're not going to get a lot.
Right.
Because why am I going to send my deputies there to help you when you won't support your own cops?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not going to do it.
Exactly.
I'm not going to do it.
No. How can you?
Right. So what message does that send to the folks in Minneapolis?
Yeah.
Right now they're trying to assess and charge these businesses who are burned down with their cleanup.
I saw that.
Really?
Yeah.
$15,000, $16,000, $17,000, $20,000 to clean up a business and charge the person who has lost everything.
Yeah.
Because of your inability to or unwillingness to respond.
And there is some unwillingness there. I'm sorry, but that's come out.
Yeah.
That they simply said, what precinct was that? They told them to give them the precincts.
Right.
Literally.
They did. Yep.
They literally, they're whatever above whoever said, give it to them.
Unbelievable.
What?
Because that's just empowering them.
That's just in our state.
I know.
That's completely empowering them.
I know.
We could go on and on and on and on. So I think we should just...
Frustrating.
It is frustrating. What's frustrating to me is the truth is not the truth anymore.
You don't know what the truth is. That's a problem.
No, you do.
Okay. Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
You just completely ignore it.
Right.
There's just... Is that you?
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good.
Sorry.
Buzzing away. Yeah. Hopefully it's not a 911.
No.
No. Good.
We're good.
No. So I people do, but they want to ignore it. So people, it's... For me, like the gentleman that I was talking to, the truth was if someone came in to his home, his property, he was going to defend it.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
But nobody else could.
Right.
You can't defend yours because you're a police officer.
Right. Right.
So you know the truth in your own circle, world.
Yeah.
But it doesn't apply to somebody else that you might disagree with a little bit.
Right.
Wait a minute.
Doesn't make sense.
Wait a minute.
Right.
I'm sorry, but that's where I'm kind of like done.
Right.
Your rules have to apply to everybody.
Yep.
That's really
Agreed.
what it boils down
Agreed.
to.
Because of everything that's going on, not just because of that, but a big motivator for us is with everything that's going on, we need to continuously remind the public that they can trust us.
Yeah.
That we're going to be there for them.
Yeah.
That the deputy that works in their town is the same deputy that is sitting.
You got all kinds of devices, dude. I love it.
Sorry.
You're good.
The deputy it's my job.
Yeah. No, and we'll wrap up.
The deputy. Well, the deputy that's responding. Is that on my phone?
Yeah.
The deputy the deputy working your community.
We're gonna take this segment, Scott. we're gonna take this segment of all your devices going crazy, and we're gonna cut it, right? We're gonna cut it and we're gonna loop it.
And
we're just blast it out there.
So my point is, what I'm trying to get at is, we work really hard to promote our staff. We
Yes.
work hard to promote the good things our men and women do who work in our communities, to continue to foster that trust, within that community, and to be as transparent as possible, and just to show them that we're human too. If we make mistakes, we're going to admit to it, and we're going to learn from it. And we're going to move. We'll move on. But these guys do great work every day, and it's not always the hero thing. It's not always the big crash. I posted something yesterday or the day before about one of our deputies, I don't know which one it was, who had stopped and was helping a little kid work on his bicycle on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't have to do that.
Yeah. Well, my kid, you met my baby, who is not
Yes,
a
I did.
baby.
Yeah, right.
And his car broke down a month or two ago, whatever it was, I can't remember.
Yeah.
And a state trooper pulled up behind him and, just said, "What can I do to help?" And he said, "Well, can we get it off the road a little bit?" Pulled up, pushed him.
Yep.
I see that all the time. That's literally what happens all the time.
All the time.
It's so sad. The narratives
We had a
twisted.
we had a deputy who, and I didn't find this out until a couple of years later, who had taken a complaint of some kids had vandalized an elderly person's property in town, and in the middle of that ended up ruining a bunch of their vegetables in their garden. And after this incident happened, this deputy at some point on his own time showed up there with a bunch of fresh vegetables he bought from somewhere and dropped them off for these folks.
Yeah.
He has no intentions of anybody knowing that.
Right.
I didn't find out until a long time afterwards.
Yeah.
But it's just a simple act of kindness that's what these guys do every day, and gals. And people forget that because all they hear is the noise.
And you guys, look, you don't do it for the money.
Oh no.
I know that. Yeah. I don't, just like what I do, I don't do it for the money.
Right.
The money's just not good.
No.
And
no.
Some of the bad officers, they probably get into it because they want to flex authority. Let's maybe put it. Sure, that could be.
Yep.
They kind of have that ego to them and want to flex that authority, and that's unfortunate. But that is not the high percentage. No. And that's just the reality.
Right.
So thanks for being here, man.
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
teach on an acronym that I have. And I teach on being strong, being hope, being influential, being necessary, and being you. So I want to thank you, Scott, for being shiny.
Thank you. I think.
Thank you for being strong.
Yeah.
Thank you for being hope.
Yeah.
Thank you for being influential. Thank you for being necessary. Thank you for being you.
Appreciate the support.
Absolutely. See you next time.
Yep.